Welcome to my video on the 2021 Psychonauts 2, the sequel to the 2005 original. The video will start with a review with zero spoilers for this game. It's very difficult to talk about this game without spoiling at least some of the first. I have not played the middle chapter. It's apparently VR only, and I do not have VR. If I ever get VR, I'm almost definitely going to play, I believe it's called Psychonauts in the Rhombus of Ruin. It's possible that after the review I will do thoughts. I haven't decided yet. We'll see when I get there. But I'm not going to spoil anything about this game in particular without first verbally letting you know. And it's almost definitely not going to happen until I'm done with the review itself. The game, I believe it's rated T for teen. Certainly this video will be. And yeah, I absolutely loved this game. So, since I already went into so much detail in my video on the first about the first, and this one is in a number of ways very similar, I'm going to try to not restate here what I said there. I don't know, hopefully there will be enough context clues that even if you don't know the first game or didn't watch my video on it, that you'll still pretty much be able to follow what I'm talking about. But there's so much in these games that it's, I'm trying to keep these videos from becoming insurmountably long. Now, this game is wonderfully progressive in a number of ways, and I'll talk about that over the course of the video. But what I'll go into right here at the start is I am indeed purposefully releasing this in observance of disability pride. So I want to talk about why that is, and there's a couple of really big reasons why, I found this to be suitable. One of them is that there was a very clear effort to make this accessible to people who, struggle with video games because of physical disabilities, including making, combat easier, and there's one that is just actual invincibility. Now, I didn't test these, so I can't speak to them. I'm sure somebody else has, and certainly, everything I did try in this game worked, so I imagine that probably also did. They've had, 5 years to patch it in, and it's one of those things, if you don't have to know that much about video game programming to know invincibility. If that's something the developers want to add to the game, that's not necessarily difficult. You kind of just turn off the damage input. Anyway, that's one of the areas. Another is, this is in a number of ways much more diverse. There's more diversity in this than in the first. And one of the characters, Morris Martinez, is indeed a physically disabled person. He is a fellow intern. At the end of the first game, I think they do call it graduate, but it's been, I haven't played the first one since, well, I played it at least once since doing the video on it, but even that was years and years ago. Anyway, you were successful enough at the summer camp at the end of the first game that you got, to go on a mission, which I understand is what Rhombus of Ruin, that is that mission. And then at the start of this one, you are told you are an intern. And there are several other interns, and that's how there's still this element of the protagonist Raz with, peers and, they don't necessarily all accept him immediately, at least. And yeah, so he is one of the interns, which means he has also succeeded at the summer camp and knows, all the interns have, psychic powers as well. And he is a master at levitation. He is in a wheelchair, and instead of wheels, it is running on this levitation ball that you yourself can also use. And there are several interesting things going on here that are really great for representation. One is, and I'll admit, this is fairly new to me, so I hope I'm going to try to not say something ignorant, but I understand that a number of disabled people don't really want to hide their disability. They do want it to be visible. That's why you will sometimes see people who, for example, have a prosthetic limb that catches the eye rather than blends in. And for an example of another piece of media to have something like this, I'm not saying it's the best thing ever made, but the Book of Boba Fett has some characters who, and one of them even says, I'm proud of this part of me, and there's no reason they shouldn't be, obviously. And the another is, and this is so in addition to using the levitation ball, instead of wheels for his wheelchair, he is a master at levitation. And it's worth noting that this is, I understand, I don't know if I'm super comfortable using the term itself, but I understand that there is a trope of making disabled characters, sometimes they will be like really powerful. The term starts with the word super, and then comes 4 letters that start up a slur against physically disabled people. Hopefully that's enough to, if you know, you know. And that is not what is happening here, because Morris is powerful, yes, but not uniquely so. This is, you spend some time of this game in the Psychonauts headquarters. Everyone there has psychic powers to one degree or another. So what we're seeing is actually that he is accepted. He is one of the people there. Yeah, he needs this mobility device. Other people need other things. And, like the first game, this has tremendous empathy for people in need of help. And it is still primarily about help with one's mental health. Right, I guess this is a decent time to say, there's a lot I love about the first game, but this game I can say I love with, without that qualifier, though I do have some issues with it. But yeah, Morris, he is not defined by his disability. He is a person with a disability. He is not a disability. And, he's got this, he really wants to do pirate radio. And you can go and talk to him about that. And just, yeah, he is a person. He is, I forget, I think they say it at some point, I forget the exact age they're supposed to be, but I don't know, maybe around 10 or 11-year-old, and yeah, he sounds like just, yeah, a kid around that age. And yeah, he is neither a saint nor just a terrible person. Those are also some of the tropes you'll want to avoid if you're trying to do positive representation for people with disabilities. I don't know if I need to give examples of famous characters who are in part, like part of how we know they're villains is some visual disability of some kind. I guess I'll say that Robert Englund famously has played at least two. And I'm not trying to like cancel Robert Englund or something. When he started playing, when he started playing the first of those, and when he played the second of those, it was a very different time. But yeah, I'm absolutely not calling him out here, to be clear. And the idea of they're a saint, that also kind of removes their individuality, and that is something that advocates for disabled people and other minorities will tell you. Please treat individual members of these communities as individuals. We are all individuals. Bonus points if you just responded. I'm not. The game does a really, really great job with these elements. And I think that does bring us into, oh, right, meant to say this earlier. I played this on PC, same as with the first one. Maybe I'll put it in the, what's it called? The title as well. Yeah, so basically, I'm only going to give a tiny bit of plot here because it's not difficult to start spoiling stuff, and I'm going to be very careful not to do so. But yeah, you arrive, the Rhombus of Ruin mission was a success, at least to some extent, and basically they're trying to, there are things that need to, there's a mystery, like with the first one. There's a central mystery, and we as players are trying to figure out exactly what is the, like the characters also are. And I am absolutely not going to spoil it, but I will say I felt tremendously satisfied. As someone who has consumed mysteries for 3 decades by now, very, very, yeah, that is what I will say for that. But yeah, as far as plot goes, this does do that thing where the sequel will kind of depower the player character and have some explanation for why they're in a situation that is perhaps not totally different from the one that they seem to break out of at the end of the first one. And I understand it's very difficult to avoid, maybe especially for something like this. But yeah, you have to re-upgrade your psi powers. Some of them you have to relearn. And I will say, really appreciate some of them you do have from the start. And this one does this great thing where, so the first one, I'd say is at least 3 tutorial levels. And I get it because the 3 things you're mastering are very different from each other. So if there weren't separate levels, I get the idea. I get why they had the idea that we got to separate this into levels. It wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the fact that essentially every single level in the first game is at least a little bit too long. And the only reason like I said, I'm trying not to restate what I said in my video on the first one. The reason I say that is because here they are not. I will talk more about the levels, but yeah, in this one, there's basically just, well, let's see, I guess maybe 2 tutorial levels, but the second one is for a new power. The first one reiterates the ones from the first. You get just enough that you can you know, like hypothetically, this could be the first you play. I would personally say if you think you can get through the first one, and I don't blame you if you can't, because it's definitely, it is a diamond in the rough, but rough it is. You know, but it's definitely, there's stuff in this that's gonna hit harder if you played the first. I'm very, very glad that I did power through the first, because there were parts of the first where I was like, this is long. Now, the, yeah, I think that might, but yeah, so basically, you know, at the end of the first one, Fort Cruller made you an agent. I forget if he specified it was honorary, but, you know, he made you a Psychonaut. And then at the start of this one, you are told, well, I'm sorry, he did not have the authority to do that. And so you are instead an intern, and yeah, you have to earn your way up. And I wouldn't have hated if there had been just a tiny bit more in the way of like an explanation, like just something like if the actually, yeah, it has been years since I played the first one. Maybe in that one they say something about that the powers that you develop in the summer camp are going to have to be redeveloped once you leave it or something, but I'm almost 100% certain they don't say that in this game. And yeah, I think that more or less, yeah. So the plot is sufficiently different. You know, there's a mystery to both, yes, but there's some pretty major. I don't think I want to give too much away, because in both of these it doesn't start immediately, and that's not a criticism, merely a neutral statement. Anyway, yeah, this fits most of the same genres or subgenres that the first one did. And it does nearly everything better. Like there's yeah, there are certain things that are not as much better as would maybe be nice. I am sorry, but those levitation balls are still a little bit of a hassle. They're hugely improved, but yeah, you know, like I said in my video on the first one, I'm not saying they should ditch them, because they are, at least as far as I know, unique. At least they're unusual. You know, I have played, I mean, it's got to be at least 100 games by now. I'm not saying you can run in all of them, but in any of them where your character can move fast, I think these two are the only ones where the reason you run is that you're rolling on this ball. You know, that is a very fun, it's part of the identity of these two games, you know? And they definitely did a lot to stabilize it. I very rarely felt like I was losing control in an unfair way. Like, obviously, you do have to, it's part of the gameplay. You gotta get good, but this time around, it didn't feel like I was struggling against game design that could have been at least a little bit better. It felt much more like deliberate. Yeah. The you know what? I think I will just very briefly note the one thing where, so one of the only criticisms I have of this game, and I want to underline that it did not ruin it for me. It didn't even come close. And the context also matters, because this was something that I criticized the first one for, and I've already mentioned in this video. The levels of the first one, I started to mention it. One of the things is the levels of the first one are essentially always at least a little bit too long. I'm not sure I can think of. The other day I sat and I thought about, and you know, to the game's credit, I remembered every level, you know. But yeah, I would say I think there might be one or two that are not inherently too long, but it's that they rely too heavily on maybe just frequently it's just one specific thing that you are doing over and over, and that one specific thing just gets old by the end. Yeah, let's see. I think it might be one or more of the tutorial levels. Like if you really look at it, it's technically not over long. But by the end of it, it's like, okay, we get it. I know how to use this thing now. And it's one of those things of like, I mean, as soon as you've given us the basics, we can kind of just practice. Like, it would be fine if there was just an area where it was like, hey, if you need to practice, spend some time here. But otherwise, you can just proceed. And that's kind of what I felt like this one did instead. I was taught things, including, yeah, some of it is just reiterated, some of it is brand new. I never felt like something was, that they spent too much or too little time on a tutorial element in this entire game. Now, with that, with that said, undeniably, there is a ton of creativity in how the levels of the first game are designed. Both of these are swimming in creativity. Like, there are so many games out there that could only dream appropriately about the level of just, it's unreal. I remain in awe of both of these games for just how much there is in that regard. But yeah, the first one, I mean, I think honestly, tell you what, if you can mention a level from the first game that you feel there simply is not that much creativity to at all, and I will grant with the let me give a brief caveat with the 3 tutorial levels, or at least 2 of them. Maybe the levels themselves are not the most creative, but then there's some other element that is maybe introduced in that level that is sufficiently memorable. I will definitely say, so I already mentioned the levitation ball. I definitely also think we spent too long fighting the sensors in the first game. And that, again, like in this one, it goes by much faster. And yeah. Anyway, every single level in the first one has some creative element to it that makes it really memorable. And the levels in this game are also still memorable. And the amount overall, I would say, is good. I don't think there are too few or too many. Really, neither of these. The ones in the first are at least a little bit too long. I wouldn't necessarily say that the ones in this are too short, but the creativity has definitely been dialed down. And I realize I am not the first person to say this. People said this like 5 years ago when it first came out. And I think they were a little too... It's great that they listen so much to feedback, because there are so many things in this. Like, I'll real quick drop in another one. I'm almost 100% certain, I didn't rewatch it, but I'm almost 100% certain in my own video back then, I said, you gotta do something about how loud the emotional baggage, which, you gotta, in these 2 games, you gotta find the baggage tag and match it to the right, not match it, if you find the right tag, and then you go up to the bag that tag matches, and you press, I think it's F, use key, they'll be matched up, that gives you some points. Helps you rise through the ranks. XP, essentially. In the first one, the crying is way too loud. Like, you are running around, and it's like, I don't know where the tag is, or maybe it's a bag that you can't get to right now. Maybe you don't have the power you need. Maybe it's one of those levels where you got to go back later once you have a new power to reach the area, and you're just running around. You're constantly hearing this obnoxious crying sound, And then in this one, like, it's much quieter. Like there were actually, there was at least once where I literally didn't realize I was hearing crying until Raz said, I think I hear, yeah, he has several lines he can say when he hears emotional baggage crying, but, and to be clear, it wasn't so low either that it, once again, there was like once, across this level, across a level, there's, I think 6 bags, and yeah, so there's a lot of bags that you hear crying. There was only once that I didn't hear it myself before Raz pointed out, and I think I was also preoccupied with something challenging or something. But yeah, they fixed that, and yeah, it's great that they listened so much to feedback, but I think they were a little scared off by how many, and I will acknowledge, and I don't know, I feel a little bit bad for perhaps contributing to that, but yeah, there were a number of us saying, listen, the levels are too long, there's too much of this, they're too one note, essentially. Unfortunately, that means that a lot of the time here, they're a tad, I feel like the word generic is going too far, but some steps in that direction. It's not that the levels don't still stand out, but it's much rarer for there to be something where you can point to and be like, oh, this is that level. The first one has a kaiju level. I mean, if I was going to try to point to something in this that's even remotely like, I mean, there's one where you use a really big bowling ball as a levitation ball, this thing is maybe, I don't know, 20, 50 times Raz's size, So that's not nothing, but you'd be hard pressed to claim that it's equivalent. You're running around as a kaiju and you're terrifying these poor little citizens, and like you find yourself playing that and it's like, wow, I didn't even think about that. This, the giant fish is more scared of me than I am of it, and that is something, that has been noted by, like the let's see, I forget, is it bears we say it about, or is it spiders? I don't remember what animal it is, but some animal, at least one animal, more scared of us than we are of it. We just think it's scary because it goes into like self-defense mode, and it's like, so do a lot of people, it's that's just kind of, that's, yeah, that happens. And I do want to underline, I definitely had major eureka moments playing this, but it didn't tend to be, okay, there's at least one where they did a great job integrating this gameplay element. But with the first one, there were more of these elements that really, and to be fair, it's not always eureka moments in the first one, but it's always memorable. And these, yeah, I think I have pretty much made my point. So other than that, this one, the streamlining I am almost entirely in favor of here, and I have noted in other videos, I think streamlining, it is very, very, you got to be really, really careful, because a lot of the time you're going to take away complexity and not really replace it with anything. You just end up with inferior product, and with this one, so you've got the thing I just mentioned. Other than that, almost nothing about it is actually bad. Certainly, I really appreciate, like, this one genuinely does away with the inventory. I can never remember how you're supposed to, where the emphasis goes. Basically, like, you've still got healing items, and you can buy other stuff. I'll go into it later in this video, but you're not, one quick example would be the fact that in the first one, if you're trying to jump into someone's mind, you have to go into the menu, grab the mind door, select it, and then, then you can go into their mind. In this one, it is done in cutscenes. And so one of the elements where this is progressive is in this one, you ask permission. You get consent, as it were, which, yeah, I do want to acknowledge that the ways that this is more progressive than the first, I don't know that anyone was expecting the first one to be more progressive than it was, because like it is a 2005 game and this one is a 2021 game. A lot has changed, but I do really appreciate that this actually kept up with the times, because I've heard of very recent games that are like decidedly hyper conservative, like going really far to just, yeah. Anyway, one thing I do know why. Once again, they got criticism. I do think some of the puzzles in the first one are much, a bit much. In this one, the puzzles are way rarer, and if you're not solving it really quickly, like there will literally be like verbal hints, and as far as I could tell, you can't turn these off, which, I'm sorry, I do think that would be a good way to yeah. There's actually, there in the first one, there's that bit where you're inside the mind of an actress, and a former actress, I guess, and you have to arrange, let's see, I think it's the background, the props, and the, was it season or time of day, something like that, and you have to match those in order to proceed multiple times. And then in this one, there is a puzzle that almost feels like a half-hearted like reference to that, and it was just a shadow of its former self. Yeah. I will just very briefly note, so I don't like to just say too many negative things these days, especially about something where clearly a lot of effort was put in. I think a good way to solve the the way that there will sometimes be a unique element, but it's not in the level for all that much, and there's a lot of levels that either just don't have it, or it's just not, but I think it would be great. They do kind of do it with at least one of them. One of them, after it's in a level, it's also elsewhere. But, for example, the bowling ball, I don't know, I wouldn't have minded if they had done, if they essentially had pulled a, For Pete's Sake, from Earthworm Jim 1. Because in that game, there's a level where, so they appreciated how justly hated escort missions, even back then, were. This is a game that's like 30 years old by now. I guess a little bit more. And once you've completed the escort mission, there is this bit where it says, okay, if you do nothing now, you've won the level. No problem. But if you'd like it to continue, we made more. It's tougher. And yeah, I've played that game, I don't know, a dozen times by now. Sometimes I want more. Sometimes I'm just like, you know what? I am relieved to have reached the ending. I'm just going to let this play out, And I think that could have been really cool. And in general, I think something a tiny bit more challenge, it's would at times have helped. I will say, over the course of it, there definitely are some very compelling challenges. And once again, I already mentioned that, if it becomes too much, there are those options in the menu. But I also want to acknowledge this is technically one of those games where if you're playing it and you're like, I wish it was a little bit more challenging, there's usually something you can do. If you are feeling like, why are they giving me so much run-up to this jump? You don't have to use all the run-up. Oh, there's not enough enemies. Okay, decide to use the weakest weapons against the ones there are. You can do things. I always really appreciate when a game has stuff like that, because there are some games that absolutely don't, and some of them it's because they can't. But I think that does more or less... Yeah, the platforming is fantastic. It's so much smoother and just like, listen, I've been... The genre of platformer, action-adventure platformer, is special to me. And some of you already know this because I talk about it incessantly. One of the very first games I played, at least. I think the first game, one of the first 2 games where I was like, I want to play video games, you know. Well, actually, yeah, I guess technically both of them were. Okay, you know what? I'll just very briefly mention those 2 games were Commander Keen 4. It was a little while before I got to play the other Commander Keens. 4 remains my favorite, though Dreams also has a special place in my subconscious. And the original Prince of Persia, I want to say 1989 game, which I loved so much that I have played... see, I wish I didn't have to qualify it, but technically I cannot claim that I've played all of them, because I have not yet played the Rogue Prince, I think it's called, or for the most recent, the 2D one. I'm afraid I forget the title. Right now my computer can't handle it. Also, I'm waiting for a sale, but I can hardly wait. I have got to play it at some point, but yeah. So platformers, it's very important to me that they're done well, because platforming is one of those genres. Like, I feel like, okay, a underwhelming first-person or third-person shooter, like, if it's not, like, terrible, like broken, or really unfair, that sort of thing, you can probably still have some fun with it, you know? But platforming, if there doesn't have to be very much wrong before it's very frustrating, and I'm sorry that was an issue in the first one. And with this one, it's so much smoother, more responsive. The first one, I forget if it's literally the case, but it felt like, playing it on PC, it felt like I was playing a half-hearted console to PC port. And in this one, it felt like I was playing a PC game. And just like, just to remind myself, I actually booted up the first one, I guess it was yesterday. Just right off the bat, the way that Raz moves and the way you move the camera, like, it's worlds apart. They really took great care. And yeah, there are a lot of really satisfying, you know, jumps and various, you know, sometimes you're sliding, for example, swinging on things, yeah, climbing. And I think every single time that I failed at a platforming thing, it was either my own fault, or it was that the level design had me thinking like, oh, I thought I could make that jump. But it was way rarer than in the first. And in the first, I'm sorry, at least some of the time, it was the game's fault. I try not to blame games. You know, I'm not saying I'm the best at playing video games. I can accept that there are games that I'm just not, you know, great at. But yeah, other than that, yeah, so I described the puzzle aspect. Yeah, I suppose that is about... Yeah, the combat is also smoother. You get to use most of the same stuff from the first. And yeah, I think that does bring us to... Yeah, so Raz, you know, we still have the... yeah, he is not necessarily a hugely different character, but I don't think he needed to be. And certainly, I felt like they did a good job with characters, like, overall. Yeah. So this brings back the adults from the first game, the Psychonauts, rather. Not the ones who's, you know, not the patients from the mental health facility, but yeah, the Psychonauts and Lobato are back. Not a spoiler, trust me. It's literally immediately, like as soon as you boot up the game, you you see all of them, I think 2 or 3 minutes into the opening cutscene. And Lily is also back. Other than that, like the kids from camp, not really back, but there's a bunch of new, the interns take over. This one, I think the overall number of major characters is roughly the same. We do meet at least some new Psychonauts, and I think they oh, okay, no, never mind, sorry. Thinking about it, no, there's more characters in... Well, no, yeah, I guess... See, that's the thing. Kind of depends on if you count those aforementioned, the patients at the mental health facility. If you count those as characters, then I think it evens out, just about. But if you don't, then there's definitely more characters in this. I was not overwhelmed, and I'm someone I'm learning this about myself. I can get overwhelmed if there's a lot of characters. And, yeah. I will briefly acknowledge that this one doesn't really do an equivalent to the mental health patients. Like, in this one, the number of levels is good, as mentioned. I did notice that in this one, you tend to go inside the heads of Psychonauts rather than, these patients. And I think it works for the game, but I can also see a case that part of the appeal of the first one was this thing of, in the first one, you go inside the head of this giant fish and you realize how it sees the world, and there's not really anything equivalent here. With that said, they do really interesting things with, you do meet the, let's see, the psychic, I forget the number, psychic 6 maybe, that are mentioned in the first game, and this definitely appears to have been the plan from the start. Like, it's too bad that it took them so long to make, these follow-ups, but it really seems like that, as best I can recall, there's not a single thing that, everything in this about the Psychic 6 is, it feels like this is what they were setting up in the first. And the first one is kind of peeking through a keyhole into the Psychonauts world, and this one is like taking giant steps into, and it worked really, really well. Now, yeah, I think... Yeah, so like the first one, you can, once you know where a character is, you can go to them and have a conversation. There's dialogue tree, feature. And yeah, maybe you talk to one and then move to talk to another based on what was said, that sort of thing. Once again, I don't know how they keep doing this, but these lines are so funny. Like, this is a hilarious game. I was laughing so much throughout this. Just these... Sometimes it's just something very small, just a little... And sometimes they'll craft something that's just absolutely incredible, and they don't really do humor that's just like, oh, look at how, like, random this is. Like, it tends to come from the characters, like, characters' personalities and special interests, stuff like that, and the situation and such, and just how wonderfully weird the whole Psychonauts universe is. I guess this is a decent enough time to say, so, I realize it's only been 5 years, that's shorter. Well, let's see, I guess it's 4 years between Rhombus of Ruin and then this, so hypothetically, but I don't know if they're planning on doing more. I don't think we need more. I wouldn't mind more. I definitely think there's a case to be made that a third one could be amazing. In the first one, you are at the summer camp, and this one, you spend some time at the headquarters. I feel like a third one could be more of like, let's go into the field. You could do like... Because, like, both of these games so far, the ones that I've played, obviously I cannot comment on Rhombus of Ruin. Both of these games have, like, these hub areas. And that works very, very well. You could do that with a field thing as well, though. You could have, like, okay, so there's, multiple important, there's not VIP, there's POIs in this area. We're going to have to examine each of them, and then it could be like, well, it would be great if I could examine this person, but they are staying in a VIP area and I don't currently have access to it. I know I will go inside the mind of someone who has access to the VIP area with their consent, obviously. I'll solve their mental health problems, as you do throughout these two games. They will go to the guards and say, hey, let this person in. That could be, you could do that to have the player gradually progress through levels like that. And yeah. Anyway, one thing I really, really loved here was the way they treat Raz's family, because like in the first one, we ultimately really don't spend very much time with anyone from Raz's family that isn't Raz himself. We meet his father close to the end, and I really love the way that they handled this whole thing of, like Raz actually says, I wasn't sure if my father was trying to kill me. And, when his father, who turns out also to be psychic, jumps into a mind very close to the end, he's like, this is what I look like to you? And that's such a fantastic point, because that is something, I have to admit, I didn't know that, I didn't always know this, but, I'm afraid I forget who it was that made this point, but, a lot of parents don't know their children as well as the children know the parents. And that is something demonstrated very well in that scene, and once you actually meet him, we understand why Raz felt the way he did, but we also are able to see, oh, he is a full person, and that they did a great job on that, because the way that it's set up, like we spend so much time with Raz, only at the end do we meet his father, and then we see, oh, like, okay, I get why he thought this, but, I'm sorry, Raz, you're wrong about that. That's not, In this one, you can spend more time with them. You don't have to spend very much time with them, but not only does he show up, but the family does. And you can talk to at least some of them, and, at least for some, have like conversations, dialogue tree and all. And where in the first one we had the problem that his father and really the family were not the most supportive, that they were not sufficiently supportive of him being a psychic and wanting to actually be, he wanted to pursue that. He wanted it to be his career. They wanted him to stay working with this traveling circus. In this one, there's such a thing as being too accepting, and the way that your peers and others perceive you is very, very important when you're the age that that Raz and the other interns are in this. And yeah, the fact that this, family of circus performers are, close to the headquarters, of course, is a potential source of embarrassment for Raz. And I thought they did a really great job with, like, you can also, like, you as the player kind of get to decide if you're thinking, like, I don't really want to deal too much with this family, they're a little embarrassing, or if you want to engage as much or more with them compared to the Psychonauts themselves. The game doesn't really punish either, and yeah, it is an actual thing. Like, there are parents who, if they realize they haven't been sufficiently supportive, end up going too far in the other extreme, and in the other direction at the other extreme, and end up, just coming across as really awkward and overbearing instead, So, wait, I forget if overbearing is the right word. Hopefully you know what I mean. And yeah, the acting, once again, fantastic. And they do a great job making all these characters have distinct personalities. I never felt like, oh, this could have been one of the other characters, And let's see. Yeah, I definitely felt like there was a good balance here of how many of Raz's peers you interact with and how many adults you interact with. And thinking about it, if you add in Raz's family, there's definitely more characters in this one than there were in the first. Yeah, sorry. And let's see. I guess that pretty much... So yeah, there's more lore here. The first one, you are entering this, or yeah, as mentioned, keyhole into this world. You really don't, like, it's you are trained by Psychonauts, sure, but this one, you go much, much further into that. And I do think that was a very clever way to set up this. It was like the end, the first one literally ends on a cliffhanger. Like, we knew that they're gonna have to make more games. This is, too big of a cliffhanger. I thought they did a really great job here. Like, this one sufficiently resolves the plot that it sets up, but it also doesn't feel like, well, there's nothing more you could possibly do with this, And yeah, it was really fascinating hearing all this backstory and seeing how everything would come together. Because the first one was very light comparatively on all this. It was more about the mystery, and that mystery didn't, like, it pertained to the summer camp, which is of course a Psychonaut training, kind of thing. But here it's actually like, no, there's definitely some connection to what happened before as far as what is happening now with the Psychonauts. The headquarters, and at first you can only walk around inside, and they do a really great job not opening up too fast. At the very start, I went around to a bunch of different doors, and each time I was told, you can't go in there yet. And then over the course of the rest of the game, gradually, I was able to go to all these different places. And yeah, after a little while, they also open up the outside. And I think overall there might be, I don't know, I think if you count together every hub area from the first and compare it to this, overall they're about the same. There might be a little difference, but I did feel like this one was less, like, once again, it's not like a huge criticism, but I did notice in the first, like, sometimes it takes a little while to walk from one place to another, and there's not necessarily anything between those two spots, And in this one, like, there's always something fascinating to look at and maybe navigate. Like, the outside, there's some water. You may have to jump over water, or there's at least one bridge, and maybe the bridge is, maybe there's at least some of the bridge missing, so you have to jump between that. That just, it adds something as you are, yeah. And this one does have fast travel. I forget right now if the first one did for the hub areas. I know that there was the replay, right, and the replay thing for brains, those levels is, I think it works the same from what I recall. Yeah. I meant to check, but apparently I thought that GOG had saved my on the, because they do have they have sync, so they must have a cloud, but I don't know, did they maybe not have that back when I played it? I guess that's possible, but yeah, so I was not able to, I booted it up, and then it was like, oh, it's starting me over from the start, and anyway, yeah. They also do a really great job making these two very distinct as far as, so yeah, the first one, you're running around these campgrounds. It's not inherently bad, and it feels natural for this kind of, that's one of the things for his age. The first one feels like, oh, it's like a summer camp. A lot of kids his age go to summer camp, but it's like psychic powers too, and spies and such, and there's a mystery to solve, And then in this one, it's like, you're now in the headquarters, and like, yeah, there's a vote of confidence from the 3 people you met in the first one that are Psychonauts, but they're not in charge at the headquarters, and the person in charge, doesn't know you, you know, so you're just an intern and you have to, you know, yeah, I thought that worked very well. Like, you're not going to mistake one of these two, you know, for each other. And yeah, I will briefly note, so most of the psi powers of the first return. There was really only one that I wouldn't necessarily have minded if it returned, but at the same time, it's not really a problem. And they introduce, I think it is specifically, I believe it's 2 new ones. I think I might talk about them when I get to the thoughts, but I was very happy that I didn't know them going into this. That's also where I'll talk about the one from, or no, come to think of it, yeah, I think there's 2, yeah, I believe it's the same number of psi abilities, but they dropped 2 of them from the first, and I did not miss one of them. The other one, you know, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say missed, but I prefer the, you know, what they brought in. That does, of course, bring up one thing that I've seen some criticize about this, and I understand why. I think it's difficult to do much about, but let's explore it. The first one was fresh. This one, it's in some ways samey, you know, and it's one of those cases where I almost wish that, like, I would love the first one if it had been, if there was like a middle ground as far as the way they made the levels between these 2 games, other than, and the, you know, the other things that this improved. If that were the case, then the first one would easily top this one. You know, as I'm recording this, I haven't yet decided exactly which of these is better. I will by the time that, you know, hopefully by the time you're watching this, I'll have given it a lot of thought, and there should already be, you know, there's a link in the description box to where I rank every video game that I've played all the way through. And yeah, anyway, let's see. I think it is, it would have been difficult to do a complete reinvention while also having enough there that it doesn't feel too different, you know. And I mean, maybe the VR game is very different, and that's where, you know, they do, and I don't even know if that one was well received. I wouldn't rule out if that one wasn't well received. It's no wonder that they went so much back to what worked in the first one. And to me personally, I think they changed enough. I did not feel like this was just the first one, not even like just a better version of the first one. It did feel sufficiently to me like its own thing, but it is one of those video game sequels that we get sometimes where they skew very close to the first. You know, like, it is more Thief 2 than Just Cause 2, for example. You know, Just Cause 2, like, is night and day. It's like, wow, they really added a lot. Like, it's, you know, in that one, there's major upgrades to what the first one did. Thief 2 and this, you know, I mean, the to be fair, I do think Thief 1 is a better, you know, first game than Psychonauts 1. But yeah, you know, they don't add that much. You know, they just improve what's there. And, you know, new story with sufficient difference, and it builds on the first. There's lore, all these sorts of things. Anyway, that does pretty much, yeah, you know, with these psi powers, like, I don't even know, I don't think it would be a good idea to add a lot more, and I'm glad they kept the ones that they did. And yeah, like, I didn't think that they necessarily needed to do more, but I appreciate, you know, I want you to know, if you're considering buying this, you know, there's not that many new ones, you know. But yeah, at this point, I must underline the telekinesis is so much better. Like, they didn't, in my video on the first one, I suggested that they just actually make it, okay, if you point to a thing and press the telekinesis button, you telekinesis the thing you're pointing to. This one does not do that. I don't think I even really used the lock-on at all in this one. I found myself using it in the first one because sometimes you kind of had to. In this one, it is sufficiently intuitive. Like there is... It doesn't necessarily... If you're pointing near something that you want to pick up and you press the telekinesis button, it might telekinesis it, if it can, if you didn't misidentify something as being telekinesisable. But yeah, it's a huge improvement. And I think I guess this is a decent enough time to just briefly note one area where you can see that this is meant to be easier than the first is in the first one, you can be attacked by, woodland critters. In this one, as far as I could tell, that doesn't actually happen. Like, there are enemies in the game, of course, but I don't think I ever saw one that was, yeah. And I don't necessarily think that that's, like, a bad thing. I don't think this needed that. Just illustrative. IMO. Anyway, that does pretty much... Yeah, I think every single acrobatic ability that you had in the first returns here. They just don't push as hard on, like, stuff that is like, okay, this is really gonna... This could give you a headache. This is gonna take a lot of... This might take a lot of attempts. And certainly a lot of areas, there's... they do a better job of not having just a lot of, you have to do platforming for like several minutes in a row here with no real break. That I don't think ever happens here. At least it doesn't. No, yeah. You're never really forced to. There's always going to be an area where it's like, okay, if you need a rest and here you go. Here's an area. And yeah, I think that more or less covers... yeah, you can still, as you gain XP and rise through the ranks, you can upgrade your Psi abilities. You gather Psytanium, which is the currency in these two games, and you can upgrade, the... yeah, there's these, I think they call them badges, at least in this one, that can slightly alter how one of your Psi powers works. And this is not connected to the, the upgrading of the specific abilities. And I think that might... Yeah, there are these little computers where you can buy aforementioned as well as healing items. Personally, it asked me to buy one healing item. I did. I used it, but I never bought more, and I was pretty happy with that. Like, hypothetically, I think when you reach the very, very end, and you'll know, trust me, they will make sure that there is a computer that you could buy stuff at. If I was going to do it again, I might buy I might buy at least some healing items. But it was fine, and I guess this is also a decent time to briefly... Yeah, so if you didn't play the first one, this... I'm almost certain it's also the case in the first one. Once you've completed a level and you redo, you can go back to pick up stuff. Some of the story sensitive, like progression bits will have been changed, and there's this little bug that teleports you around because you can't just walk everywhere. Yeah, you can't platform everywhere when you are redoing a level, And I think if you miss one of the collectibles that is, that would otherwise be locked if you didn't get it the first time, I think they just place it somewhere that's easy to get to. As that happened at least once. I don't know if it's universal. I guess this is enough time to say. Let's see. I replayed the first couple of levels, but then I didn't. I tried. Every time I saw something collectible, I made an attempt to get it. But if I didn't get it, relatively quickly, I might just move on to the next thing. By the end of the game, I was rank 70, and there's an ability that says you can only upgrade it once you reach 102. So I think 102 is the top limit, the maximum. I think at some point I will go back and try to reach 102, but it is not going to happen soon. There's so many games I want to get to, but yeah. I think that might cover that entire... Yeah, so the camera, third person view, and you can move the camera somewhat freely, enough in my opinion. And yeah, so the controls, I really appreciate that in this, so once again, I booted up the first one. Best I could tell, you can program 3 different psi abilities, and then, one of them will just automatically default to your melee. And in this one, you still have the melee psi power, but you can reprogram that button too. You can you can choose any 4 abilities you want to put there. And I really appreciate that, because there were definitely times where I was like, this does not call for using melee at all. Right, I mentioned healing items. I want to briefly explain why. So basically in this, you can very frequently find healing within levels. They sometimes look different level to level, but you can usually identify them. There's, visually they're quite distinct. And you break the thing you find, and healing items will pop out. And sometimes there'll be several of those right before a boss fight, for example, or that sort of thing. And there was at least one boss fight where I actually got to heal during it as well. Like it required me to, it took a little effort, but it was there. And that was definitely one of the major things in the first one, was how punishing the gameplay could be. And I think they did a fantastic job here. Now, other than that, I also wanted to make sure to note the, let's see. Yeah, I think, no, I'll save that for later. Anyway, I guess that does... Yeah, the gameplay, there's enough depth and variety here that they, I never felt like it just had me doing the exact same thing for way too long, which, say it with me, an issue in the first game. And yeah, and I will definitely also say, I mentioned that I wish there was more unique. There was definitely, like, if you play this game for the platforming, trust me, there's so much platforming, you're not gonna feel like you didn't get, enough. Like, if you explore the hub areas and you try to go everywhere in the brain levels, there's so much platforming. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Like, that's one of the reasons I even played these 2 games, frankly, is the platforming. But obviously the concept is also really, really cool. I think this is a decent enough time to briefly explore. So yeah, both of these games, they are trying to destigmatize mental health problems, and sometimes the humor can get a little insensitive around it. And yes, this unfortunately still has, I think I'll talk about it in the thoughts section, but there is still one thing that, I don't know, personally, I just think, I'll try to put it at the start of the thoughts section in case you really badly want to know. But there is one specific thing here that I just don't think needs to be in I don't love when jokes about that are made. I have very thick skin. Thick skin. I have high tolerance. You have to really, really go far to offend me. But yeah, I mean, certainly I'm not going around looking for things to be offended by. You know, I don't know. Hopefully you can tell that I'm not a, conservative media personality. I am a cishet white male. And if you combine all those together, boy, do those people love to find things to be offended by. They talk about like how we leftists are like, oh, oppression Olympics. No, that's you guys. And I do specify guys. Anyway, I think that does pretty much... Yeah, anyway, both of these do a really great job, and I really appreciate it. I was a tiny bit worried. Once I realized how much of this was, very similar to the first, I was a tiny bit worried. Oh, are they just going to do some of the same? No, not as best I recall, at least. These are brand new, and it's not necessarily every single level that's exploring a different run from others, but I didn't feel like there was more than one level devoted to one major thing that I think I might talk about in the thoughts section, but I felt that worked because it is a really big deal. But there were several times where, yeah, they do such a great job communicating these issues and telling, this young player base for these games. I'm not saying it's only young people playing these, but it's not only teenagers, but there are so many things here. Hopefully these two were both played by a lot of teenagers because there's so much that can help them. It's such a vulnerable part of your life. You're trying to figure out who you are, and there's so much misinformation, so much bigotry out there, and for games like these two to fight back against that, it's absolutely love to see it. Now, I guess this is a decent enough time to note. So yeah, this one I definitely felt more of a sense of like ethnic diversity. I already mentioned his name is Maurice Martinez. One of the Psychonauts we meet in this is an African American woman. The first one does have at least one woman. Mia is... crap. Is it Mia or Mila? I forget how they pronounce it. But yeah. But in this, more women, and fortunately there's at least some misogyny. But the female characters do also have personalities and agency and such, and that is also, Lily and Mila did have that in the first as well. Now, yeah, I think that might just about cover. I guess I'll just very briefly note. So there is at least one actor here who I don't think I saw anyone say it, but I wouldn't rule out that some would see that they're in this and be like, that's stunt casting. I definitely think everyone did a fantastic job here, and that includes, the person or persons that some might think was stunt casting. Like, this is not like some just like, well, they're famous, let's just put them in. No, this is someone who does a really, really great job voice acting. And let's see, I guess that does pretty much cover... Yes, so the enemy design, I have to say, I feel is a huge leap forward. So in the first one, enemies... I'm not going to claim that there's not variety, because there is. But I definitely do think that... it makes more sense for me to just lay out. So basically, in the first one, you do have some enemies that show up in multiple, such as the sensors, and they come in different shapes and sizes in both of these games. In the first one, some levels will have unique to specific level enemies. So the board game where you're playing, let's see, you're helping Napoleon Bonaparte's descendant win a board game, So there are French soldiers in the game as enemies, in that level. This one, I don't know that there's even one enemy that isn't a boss or mini-boss that is only in one level. Rather, what they do is, over the course of a number of levels, I'm not going to give away if it's all of them, but yeah, they gradually build up a rogues gallery, and it's not necessarily that every enemy type is in every of the last several levels, but it gives them a tremendous variety that just really blows the first one out of the water, and once again, I do think there's fun stuff. Like, if I recall correctly, I believe you fight some of the fish military in the level where you're a kaiju and all the fish are tiny, or I guess human-sized, you're the one who's giant. That's fun, obviously. But yeah, in this one, you've got sensors and you've got these various, like, mental health issues that will pop up and you have to fight. And they do such a phenomenal job making it so that they change how you approach it. Because, like, some of them, you do not want to fight melee. Some of them, ranged is not necessarily the best to do. There's so much here. There's at least one that literally, in order to defeat it, you pretty much, you literally do have to, and the game makes this clear to be, don't worry, you have to use one of the specific psi powers if in order to defeat this enemy. And like, they do such a great job. Like, I believe the term is back to the drawing board. Like, they really just, like, I didn't, throughout playing this, I did not feel like there was anything that they felt was, like, impossible for them to change, like, throw out and make something new from the ground up. They kept what they felt worked and changed what needed to be. And yeah, there are things in this that I would argue there's no equivalent to in the first one. And the AI is also great. There's enough different behavior. They have different patterns. And yeah. I will very briefly note, this was also the thing where I already mentioned, sometimes the game will tell, there will be these verbal things to help clue you in. There was one level where I spent, like, maybe 5 minutes fighting some enemies, and I don't personally think that I took a terribly long time. But as soon as I was finished, immediately Raz was like, oh, now I remember my current, and then he states the current objective. And it's like, maybe it's more difficult than I thought to program for that, but I feel like, I was in combat. It's not like I was just, the game was kind of reacting as if I had just been standing still for 5 minutes, or maybe just walking back and forth aimlessly for 5 minutes, and I don't know. It's an absolutely tiny thing. It just, part of what I want to say is it almost never happened. It happened, like, let's see, there was one puzzle where I was like, okay, I get it, you don't have to do this much hinting. And then there was that one combat, and it's just worlds away from the incessant crying emotional baggage in the first game, and yeah. And I do really appreciate that they kept the emotional baggage, because I believe I said that in my video on the first one. It is a really fun idea, because it's true. We have emotional baggage, and it's great to try to sort it out. And it's just, I'm sorry, there's something genuinely kind of fun about seeing, okay, that makes me sound, I'm not saying it's fun to hear and watch someone cry. I'm saying it is a creative way to visualize, because like, you know, teenagers playing these games, they understand. They're like, oh yeah, tell me about it. You know, we all have emotional baggage, and when you see it like that and the game rewards you for sorting out emotional baggage, you know, I mean, I feel like a lot of people will play these and be inspired to try to sort out their own, maybe help others sort out theirs. Yeah. Now, that does pretty much... Yeah, so this does have some fetch quests. Some of it is completely optional. It's a way to rise through the ranks. And I mean, if you don't do it, you're not going to reach 102 rank, I imagine. But you don't really have to. I will say, really appreciate... I forget if this was the case in the first one as well, but in this one, they definitely... To be clear, I'm not saying that the first one for sure didn't anyway. But in this one, there is at least one point of no return, and the game warned me. Like, it said, you know, sure about that? And I really appreciate that. I think nearly any game that has point of no return of like serious magnitude should have that sort of thing, you know. And yeah, some of the levels, it is also, you know, okay, in order to complete this level, you have to get this thing, you know. I never felt like they overdid that, you know, considering how many levels there are, they easily could have. And yeah, I think that does get us nicely to... So, the individual levels are indeed still largely linear. Like, there are some things where you can solve, you know, there's at least one level where at the very start, it's like, okay, there's 3 things you have to do here. And you can immediately see, oh, well, I mean, it's got to be these 3 different places that I can visually easily tell I can go to all 3 of these places. Yeah, you know, do them in whatever order you want. And yeah, and in case you like get distracted, I mean, I have unmedicated ADHD, tried it medication once, made things worse. You know, if you need a reminder, like I'm a big fan of, you know, I think for some games, you just have a pad of paper and a pencil next to you. Another thing in this game, you know, if you're looking at an area you haven't visited yet, there's probably... they're called figments. You know, some of them are like flying, some of them are standing, some floating, stuff like that. If you make sure as you clear an area to, you know, if you're completing the objective in that specific area, just try to pick up every figment as well, so that once you're back to the, you know, area where you can see from a distance, you'll be able to tell, well, there's no figments there clearly, so I must have been there. And that's also still just a really cool way to do that. And I do love the them, you know, sometimes flying around and such, and it always felt like it made sense, both what the figments were and when they would be flying, where they would be flying, stuff like that. And yeah, you know, because the moment that you see one of these things in midair, you're like, I should jump to there, but how? You know, and it's just so good. Now, let's see. With that said, the hub areas, you know, and the order to some extent of levels, there's at least one point where you get to choose when, you know, there are... You know what? I don't think I'm building this up enough. There are a lot of levels in this game where you get to choose the order in which to play them. There are a few that are like very specifically defined, but there's a lot of them where you get to choose the order yourself. And certainly the first one, to some extent, you know, once you reach the island, you know, not the Michael Bay movie. Was that the last one? I think that was the most recent Michael Bay movie I watched. Yeah. It just no, not a good movie. Not a fan of Michael Bay in general. I think that was the one that just had me thinking, you know what? Life's too short. I don't need to watch Michael Bay movies. I think it is very telling when you have to rip off a movie so bad that MST3K tore it apart and you don't improve that much on it. Like, it's more visually appealing, sure, but like I'd rather rewatch. I guess just in case, I'm not going to mention the title, but it's easy enough to find out. But yeah, even without MST3K on. Anyway, yeah, once you reach the island in the first one, yeah, the order in which you help the mental health patients is up to you. And right now I forget, I think the 3 tutorials you do have to do in order. At least the first one you do have to do before the other 2. Right now I don't remember for sure if the other 2 allow. But yeah, there are some, there's some level of choice there. And yeah, this one, like, it really is very significant. There's not that many of the levels. Like the first one, when the game starts, there's a cutscene and then it gives you control and you are in the first level. Not terribly, after that you get little, you can run around the hub area some, but there's not that many areas you can explore. Then you get to the second level. I think it's once you've completed this, yeah, it's certainly not very long after that you are, getting to choose which, yeah, the order of the levels. And each time you have some idea, like you'll go to a character and they'll say something that makes it clear what their, something major in their, yeah, in their level, what that's going to be. And also keep in mind, in both of these, like if you find yourself in a brain and you're like, I don't know about this, smelling salts, that is still around in this. It's just that it's in the yeah, it's in the same menu that you can also like quit, for example. You don't have an inventory or inventory like in the first. I think that's that is where the smelling salts were in the first one, and yeah, the atmosphere is phenomenal. Like, I am truly just gobsmacked by how well they do at, like, there are levels in these 2 games that are so different from each other that I feel like if you showed just like, I mean, I guess it's kind of a giveaway if you show gameplay or the player character, but if you just showed like a video that didn't show those things of some of these levels, yeah, you might be able to convince someone, oh, these are all different games, by the way, just, yeah. There's this kind of hippie thing, which I really appreciated. It's not like, hippies were terrible. Like, it actually appreciates why, hippies were hippieing. And there's some areas that are very dark, yeah. And I mean, ultimately, every brain level represents some kind of mental, well, it's not always a problem, but there's, something, you're exploring something mentally in one way or another, Anyway, yeah, this is still very much this thing of like, I forget if I specifically said, but it reminded me somewhat of like Tim Burton. We've got this kind of quirky, exaggerated, visually kind of thing, and sometimes it's very dark, sometimes it's kind of, I don't know if I want to say corny, but it's sincere, and yeah, I didn't check with all of them, but some of the cutscenes are definitely skippable. Like, you just gotta hold down spacebar for a few seconds and it'll skip, which I really appreciate, because there are times where this will checkpoint save right before rather than right after a cutscene. But yeah, I'm not even sure you have to watch any of them the first time. I think I did at least once check, and I let go of spacebar because I didn't want to see the cutscene. But I tested, and if I recall correctly, it would have let me skip the cutscene if I really wanted to. Right, and if you as well, you know, have some wrist pain and can't play for terribly long, like currently I can play for 12 minutes in a row. This game, I think the shortest was maybe 5 minutes. I'm not sure there's a bit that's longer than 10, provided that you are actively making progress. Like if you're exploring, yeah, it's possible that you won't, you know, but yeah, that is yeah. If you're not really struggling with the platforming, that is. Obviously it could take longer, if that. And this game also, and I'm sorry, I think this should be in any game that it is possible that does not have manual saving, that where you can just save anytime. If you press quit, you know, yeah, it has the standard thing of like, are you sure? But it includes how long in seconds and minutes since the last save. And there were times where I had missed the icon, so I was like, oh, it saved that recently. Oh, because there's a little purple brain up in the right corner when it saves. And yeah, there were times where I thought it had saved, and then I found out from that it hadn't. And yeah, you know, once you're told, you know, it's that amount of minutes, you can kind of try to figure out if you are going to push your wrists or if you're like, you know what, I can just redo that part. Fine. And yeah, like any time where it said, you know, are you sure? You last save was like 7 minutes ago. I knew as long as I'm laser focused, I will be able to find a new save spot within, you know, like about 3 minutes or so, you know, especially if sometimes you may have to, I wouldn't rule out that you might find yourself skipping a cutscene or something for that. But I mean, that's also, you know, during a cutscene you're not using your wrist, so that can maybe help even things out there. The graphics, I don't think I know the words to express how much of an improvement that is. That was, again, like I remembered more or less what the, you know, as soon as I booted up the first time, I was like, wow, this is so much better, because I sort of remember the first one well. And then once I had played all the way to the end, you know, I didn't remember the first one that well, and so I booted up the first one. I was like, wow, that really was a major improvement, you know, and 100%. I'm not saying that the first one looks bad. Like, it's 2005. Like, it was impressive for the time. It just also had some of those issues that, you know, a number of 3D platformers had at the time, such as these large open areas where you don't really do anything. That was also an issue in, see if I can remember them. So one of them, I think it's just called Sonic 3D. Was that the one? It's been so long since I played that one. I think I only ever played the demo, but I definitely noticed that. I hear it's true of Earthworm Jim 3D. It was definitely, I don't think I played that much of Rayman 2, but I definitely noticed it there. And Super Mario 64. And I appreciate, you know, some people really don't like when I say that, but I'm sorry, I played that game for many, many hours. I mean, I'm sorry, am I wrong? Are you really telling me that compared to the 2D ones, which I personally prefer, that you don't see that there are these big open areas where there isn't really anything to do, and we're just kind of moving from point to point, which, like, I'm sorry, when I play a platformer, I want to do platforming. You know, I love, let's see, it's the first two, and then the first two Super Mario Land games, and then Wario Land, which for the longest time I thought was supposed to be Super Mario Land 3. I forget if we ever did get Super Mario Land 3 around here, or just, but for a while they released Wario Land. That was the one that they released, and we didn't get Super Mario Land 3. Anyway, moving on. The yeah, it's I wanted to briefly acknowledge. So I saw at least one person say that they thought that it was bad that the graphics were better because the art style works better for, in their opinion, for the first, which is a little rougher around the edges, you know. And I have to respectfully disagree. I agree that you know, it takes a little getting used to, but I think it works. I was never like put off by it as such. And I mean, I get, it is obviously an art style that gets a reaction in the player or viewer if you're watching a Let's Play, because like asymmetry is definitely a thing. Sometimes there's at least one character who has glasses where the let's see, I think it's both the shape and size of the individual glasses are very different, and some characters, like one of their eyes will be up here and the other will be down here, that sort of thing. Now let's see, and some characters, their eyes are these kind of bulging out with a tiny little pupil, and like it's if you saw something that looked like that in the real world, obviously you'd be put off, but this is this kind of exaggerated world. That's the case in the first one as well. Now the sound design is fantastic. Whether you are taking or dealing damage, it sounds impactful. And yeah, there are so many things where you can hear if you interact with it. They make sure that you can hear whether that was good for you or bad for you. I do also briefly want to acknowledge, especially because I don't think it's a big deal. At first I thought, oh, this is going to be a problem. I forget if it was a problem the first one, but there was one time where I broke a container close to an edge, and some of the stuff inside fell off the edge. Now, I want to underline that it was not stuff I needed. It was either Psychonauts or healing. And at the time, I was like, is this going to happen a lot? And it didn't. So just in case you are worried about the same thing, if you just started the game or you're going to play it after this video, please let me know if I convinced anyone to play this, because I really do think yeah, it really is fantastic. And there's so much Psychonauts and healing to find throughout this game that it really wasn't. There's even there's actually upgrades you can buy. Might be pretty expensive, but you can buy things that make you earn double the amount of Psychonauts, and there's also one for lowering the prices of stuff in the store. So very nicely done on that. And it is, basically the idea is once you've, you could choose to save up for it early on, or you can save it for late in the game. Certainly, if you don't feel the need to buy everything, obviously you don't actually need those. I think I ended up, let's see, it has you buy one specific, and it's just aesthetic. And I think you can get several other aesthetic ones. I ended up not really bothering with those. I think I bought 3 things that I ended up using, and then just use those for the rest of it. And I mean, occasionally, because the Psychonauts was, this is one of those games where once you've reached a certain number, you cannot keep picking up, the currency. So every so often, I did find myself spending something on something expensive just so I would have room to pick up more Psychonauts. But other than that, Anyway, the music is fantastic. Every step of the way, it perfectly fits. If you are inside when you are inside the headquarters, it's this, low-key kind of spy. Like, it's not, the Mission Impossible theme. It's because it's not like high tension, but it's just like you can tell, okay, this is spy, this is serious business. When you're outside in like nature areas, it's more that kind of thing. It's something that fits that. The various levels will have something that fits those. Yeah. Now, yeah, I think so. Yeah, some of the achievements are genuinely just play so and so far into the game and you'll get this achievement, but there's also some where it's asking you, like this is one of those games where you may want to look at least some of the achievements, because there was one where I was like, I didn't know I could do that, but I'll try. And yeah, I was very happy to have found out that worked. And yeah, I definitely, like the first one, this has a profile system. And I'm afraid I forget. I meant to check, but I forget right now how many different slots. I know the first one has like 4 profiles you can set up, but yeah, right now I'm afraid I think I saw it the very first time I fired up the game, but I'm certainly I'm quite certain that there was a thing for choose. You know, never mind. I'm sorry. I have to be careful about not. I'm a little worried I'm mixing it up with something else. There might be a profile system for this one. Certainly, I could imagine playing it through again. At the very least, to reach the highest rank. And it is one of those games, for better or for worse. Like, this is very much a matter of opinion. There are parts of this game where you cannot access the very first time you encounter those parts, and essentially you're meant to make a mental note and return there later, And keep in mind, there is a bit inside the menu where you can see, how much do I still need to pick up to have 100%ed that particular, section. I hardly ever ran into any bugs or glitches. Let's see, it crashed to desktop once, and then I lowered and that was very, very close to the end too. I did not lose very much. I don't know, 1 or 2 minutes of having played. Let's see. Did the it almost feels silly to say out loud, but just in case someone doesn't know, verify game files. Right. I have this on Steam. I forget if that makes a difference. Verify game files. Sure, let's see. There was the thing about which DirectX version. Right now I forget which one, but it's easy enough to find this online. That's how I found it. And once I opened the game again, I lowered some of the graphics settings. Other than that, occasionally, never for more than 3 seconds, and like we really are talking occasionally. Like I don't know, 0.001% of the time when I started up a level or start up the game, enter a new level, that sort of thing, 3 seconds max, sometimes less, lag, and then it was fine. Ran perfect the rest of the time. Sometimes there would be hours and hours between this happening, even twice. So it does a really good job with the setting. The headquarters feels appropriately spy, and the area outside, they do a good job. Like there's this cave section. There is, there's multiple wooded areas. One of them is like, maybe you shouldn't go in there kind of thing, and through and through, they every area feels like something that would exist within this world. And, I don't think I ever really felt like, okay, the level design is just telling me this is where it didn't feel obvious. It felt like, okay, there really is, And it hardly ever happened that I couldn't tell from the level design where I was supposed to go or what I was supposed to do. It happened way more in the first one, and the levels are so varied. There's not 2 of them that I would mistake for each other. And I guess that does pretty much, right. Environmental storytelling is also great. And I guess at this point, I wanted to briefly note, I really appreciate that with both of these, they don't try to force in co-op or multiplayer, because I do not think it would work at all. And that does cover everything. So I rate this 8 mental themed spies on mission out of 10. And we're going to get into a thought section if my keyboard is willing to respond. There we go. So I'm going to start with a couple of things that they feel a little spoilery, but I understand if some want to know them going in. I'm not going to spoil the ending before I'll let you know when I get into like major spoilers or something. But yeah, so the two psi powers that they drop for the first are invisibility, which I'm going to be brutally honest, I didn't remember that was a power there. I think there's at least one level where you're supposed to use it at least once, and that's it. I mean, I never missed it. I didn't even remember. I literally, I kept trying to remember, and eventually I just looked it up, and it was like, oh, wow. The other one, the one that I did, I wouldn't necessarily have hated if it was here, but I prefer what they replaced it with. The other one is the confusion grenades, and yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really. I never felt like I needed it here. It's fine that it's in the first, but I didn't miss it here. The two that are new, and after that I'll talk about the original ones, the ones that are universal in both games. The two new ones are mental connection, which enables you to. It's a I believe it replaces something. See, in the first one, sometimes there would be these jumps that would just be like really punishing. And in this one, they have the mental connection instead, because there's no real, like, once you've jumped into one of the nodes, you can hang there, like, let's see, I think there might be some, right now I forget. No, I believe there's at least sometimes an area where, if you stay at one node for too long, something will hit you, but you can easily tell, and you can just jump forward or back. There's definitely a timing thing going on with them, but it's not, just unforgiving like and I thought that was a really great idea. And it also does this thing where okay, I'll talk about that later because that's a little bit more of a spoiler. The other one is that you can make a hand-drawn clone of yourself. And because he's drawn on paper, Clone Raz can, get into places that regular Raz cannot. And this, of course, opens up areas that you otherwise could not have. Yeah. Other than that, it's the same psi power. So you've got I already mentioned telekinesis and melee. You have Psi Blast, which is your basic ranged attack. I already also mentioned levitation, which of course, yeah, right. In case you forgot or whatever, still enables you to float, not fly. And let's see, that brings us to there's one called something that I don't remember, but that's not actually what it's called. But you can see someone else, what someone else is perceiving, and yeah, I think that almost covers. Let's see what is left. Other than that, you have the time slowdown, which there's there's a patch that you can buy that yeah, in the in-game store. I mean, not like a software patch, but there's a patch that actually makes things go faster. And I'm not even sure. Maybe that's just like for fun. But anyway, and I think that might just about cover. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the enemies. So I think as soon as I've talked about the enemies, okay, maybe I'm going to give some examples of levels, and then I'll talk enemies. And these examples will be minimal spoilers, but they spend more than one level on grief. And personally, I think that is a good way to handle that, because grief is one of those things, we're all going to do it at some point in our lives. That's sad, but true. And we here in the West, maybe especially us cis-het white men, have got to get better at talking about it so we can help each other through it. And yeah, this game can really help with that. other than that, you have this, you do get to go on at least one spy kind of mission. And there's a level where you are helping, there's this mind that does not have enough sensory input, sensory data. And so you're helping it, rediscover those. Yeah. And they do such a great job, just these various, the senses. I think that might be what I'm going to say about the levels for now. Other than that, the enemies, and I'm not gonna give away mini bosses or main bosses yet, but the I guess I will very briefly note the no, never mind. I'll talk about the enemies. So I already mentioned, you're right, sensors, I didn't really describe them. So if you don't know the first game, sensors basically, they are running around attacking with no. Some of them have ranged attacks where they say the word no, and there's it's that symbol with like a circle and a line through it. Some of them will try to stamp you with that for physical attacks. Some of them, there's a sensor that's bigger. These are also in the first one, and I think maybe nightmares are also in the first one. And the nightmares are these slimy things that you really don't want to use melee against, and they leave a trail of slime. I think, let's see, is it when moving? It's definitely when they're destroyed. They leave some slime behind, which means that as you destroy them, now I remember one more power, pyrokinesis is also. And occasionally, if you set something on fire that Raz wasn't expecting you to, he'll like apologize for it and say, I need therapy. But the, yeah, that, so those are, I think those enemies are also in the first one from what I recall. But this one, in addition, has these other, there's panic attack. There is one that's, I forget what it's called, but it's basically like being overly judgmental kind of thing. So it's a judge running around with a hammer. And yes, you can TK the hammer away from him and at him. There are these things that is like, I think it's like guilt. And they're like, they carry these heavy weights, and you can pick up the weight. Be careful that you're not under them, because they will drop the weight on your head. Very cartoony, but you can also grab the weight before they even have a chance to attack with it, and then you can attack them or someone else with the weight. And there's also these things, I think they're impulses, and they will like try to attack you with bombs. And sometimes if a bomb hits you, it will blow up. It also becomes like a proximity mine if it doesn't hit you, but also doesn't hit anything else that will make it explode. You can also TK these. And I think there might even be an achievement for that, and maybe also the weight thing, and over the course of, right. And I do also gotta mention there's also enablers, and it's almost self-explanatory, but the effect they have in game is that they protect other enemies, and if you are attacking an enemy protected by an enabler, Raz will say, I have to take out the enabler first. The enablers, if you try to get close and use melee, they will just push you away. They run around if you try to get close to them. They dodge side blast. Like, you really got to put effort to stop them, And they're cheerleaders, and they will like chant things that's like, well, that is what an enabler sounds like, technically. And I think that covers that. So yeah, from here on out, I am talking major spoilers. So yeah. I kind of love the entire opening with, so yeah, at first, like, I bought it. I thought, okay, this is what Raz's life at headquarters looks like. He's got a desk job. And Lily shows up, and she's like practically talking about, the sounding like something, a character out of Office Space or something, and the TPS reports. That's the thing. She was, yeah, and then there's the thing about, okay, now Lobato is our most valued employee, and at that point it's like, I see what's happening here. And it's like, okay, you just have to let us know, where would you like to go? Is there any particular place in your mind that maybe you would like to go back to? Or you could also just tell us who you're working for, and we can have them authorize it. You're just fantastic, And of course, he does realize it, starts running off, and immediately the level, like, if I recall correctly, it is right there that we get the first bit of like gravity being, weird, or and because he's a dentist, so we're running around inside, the human mouth, and we're attacked. Oh, right, this level does actually. Now that I think about it, this level does have unique enemies because you've got the little chatter teeth things, and yeah. I forget if it's in the first, because I do remember pyrokinesis being in the first, but I forget if it's new that you sometimes have to burn something that's covering something, in order to proceed in the video game. And yeah, I think that's what I will say. Yeah, it was really cool when there's the part where like open your mouth, and then okay, now rinse, and the water flushes them down, and yeah. Fantastic tutorial level. You understand fighting. By the end of it, you know how to fight with the basic. At that point, I'm pretty sure you do already have the Psy Blast. But yeah, melee Psy Blast. Mila shows up to remind you how to use the levitation ball and floating and such. And of course, before the level is over, you have encountered your first mental connection nodes, but you cannot use them yet. This was a level I replayed. I also did replay the see, I don't know if it counts as 1 or 2, but the ones related to Hollis, But after a while I realized there's still stuff I can't get, and I think that was the last time I replayed a level. I tried from the start to get every figment and piece of emotional baggage and all of this stuff on the first run through of yeah. And yeah, so after that first level, great job on the cutscene. And not terribly long after, you find yourself in Hollis' mind, and because you showed up late, they, let's see, I forget if that's when they haze you with the thing. That also just felt very credible, and it's the kind of thing that could come off as really like mean-spirited. I do still, okay, I'll just briefly note, I'm sorry, I don't need there to be animal cruelty in these two games. Now, obviously, I'm not saying literal animal cruelty. I get that this is fiction. They don't look like real animals. I just, it bothered me. I didn't think that it was funny in either of these. I appreciate that at least in this one, you could more or less avoid it. Like, as soon as I saw that Sam was being, really mean to at least some of these animals, I'm sorry, I didn't really talk to her after that. And let's see, the yeah, so the you use the, I really, one thing I definitely want to talk about is Hollis. I thought they did such a great job on, you have this thing of like, she's worried about bringing the interns in, but it's also like, be great if she could be in command of the mission, but she's she's worried about the budget, and you're trying to make her think, oh, but I mean, risk can lead to success. And because we're only thinking, I will admit, like, not only Raz, but me as the player, I was also sitting there thinking, like, I really want to go on a mission, though, So I wasn't really thinking about the money, even though that was also mentioned. So, yeah, when she decides that high risk, high reward, she goes gambling instead of, I mean, yes, she brings the kids along for a mission, but she just went there to gamble, and yeah, really nicely done on that. And yeah, so yeah, and the entire Lady Luctopus level, I love this element of, I'm sorry, I have such a soft spot for that. There's other games where I love it too. I don't think I can mention any of them without spoiling, but this thing of having a level and then the player gets a sense of, oh, this is, and then we return later and it's completely different, oh, actually, yeah, non-spoiler example, Prince of Persia Warrior Within, where you time travel. That's not a spoiler. That's literally, you find out, oh, you got to time travel if you want to get through this game, Yeah, you see some of the same areas in two different time periods, and yeah. And here, yeah, first you're just, you go to the hospital because, like, obviously it bothered her when this, doctor stole her idea. And then, she didn't mean to, make this mess. But we, the player, Raz also ends up doing the same. And, Agent 9 is like, you really got to be careful about that, and ultimately you're not punished. And I did really love the part where, when she realizes, Raz, did you do this? He's like, yeah. And she's like, so you helped me, that was a great, yeah. Because that is, that's the glass half full version. He did technically help. He fixed his own mess, or mixed his own fez. And yeah, the second, when you're inside yeah, so when you're at the hospital, it was like, okay, it's distinctly more gambling theme than last time. And then you're inside, and it's just this thing of like, excuse me, this is the VIP area. You can only enter if you have 3 gazillion. And so it's like, I gotta get 3 gazillion, And yeah, so I ran around in the various areas. I will say I did find I had a tiny bit more trouble than I necessarily wanted to, finding out exactly where to get. I kept forgetting which part I had already gotten a gazillion from. I wouldn't have hated if they had maybe had some kind of visual marking, or maybe before entering, Raz could say, I already got a gazillion from here. Are you sure you want to go back? But yeah, I did get them, and I just briefly have to comment on the NPC design, because one of the characters I talked to is, I want to say it's called a speculum. One of them is, and I love I can't say enough how much I love these details. I appreciate that the game is willing to get gross. One of the characters I talked to is a urine sample, complete with the, it's in the see-through glass and everything, and as it moves around, it's the head, the urine sloshes around in there, and that's so nasty. And one of them is an injection, and yeah, and yeah, you have the thing about, like, oh, her heart's in the wrong place, wink. And you go to talk to it, and it's like, well, I can't win the race like that. And of course we know, I should win the race. And I gotta say, the race, I'm sorry, that was definitely an area I wish they had, for Pete's sake, because I would have loved, I had so much fun there. It's the only race, it's the only, it's that kind of race. There's also the timed segment, the race against time. Yeah, I think that is right. And fantastic boss. There's just enough of, like, you gotta get tactical, you gotta really think about, you gotta recognize the pattern and such. I'd say overall the boss fights, high marks. I definitely appreciate that they're not so, overly difficult as in the first one. And keep in mind, I say that as someone who at age 7 played, I didn't beat it back then, but it took years before I was able to get all the way through that game. But yeah, I was playing Prince of Persia 1989. If you've never played, like, that one, for its time, it's not the easiest game ever made, but anyway, I don't know, I did notice that a number of them, it's this kind of like arena with not necessarily a huge amount of area to move, and there'll be like phases and such. I liked when they did something more varied, such as the whirlpool, where you're sailing around the circle. I don't know, I mean, ultimately I don't think I really have much of a criticism against the boss fights. I think it was more the fact that there were, I'd also say it was the right amount. There were more of those than there were these really creative, okay, this is the unique thing about the level as far as a gameplay element. And that was something that I would have liked if they also had. Again, maybe just make it like an optional thing. That would help solve the issue of, I appreciate maybe some people don't want something that, like, specific. And yeah. Anyway, I think, yeah. So I guess it goes without saying that the rest of this is not going to be listing the levels in order, because what is the order? Yeah, it was very fun getting to partake in the mission, and wonderful seeing all the interns helping out. There's both there and at the very end fighting Maligula. But yeah, and I did also appreciate, yeah, all of them have some new, thing to contribute there. That was great. And yeah, also just the concept of a casino that disallows people with psychic powers. I mean, that, yeah, if psychic powers, because the universe of the Psychonauts is just like, well, yeah, psychic powers exist. Some people are spies, some people are villains, whatever. And let's see, yeah, finding out that there's a mole, and then you're trying to figure out who, and yeah, genuinely so clever, because like, I forget if they actually spell it out. I'm not sure they verbally spell it out, or maybe there's a cutscene I didn't trigger conversation, whatever. But yeah, we see, oh, there's a photo of Lily there, and that of course has him worried that she's the mole. And I felt pretty confident that she wasn't, but at the same time, it is also, plot-wise, they need to explain why she isn't working with him, basically. In the first one, by the end, before you reach the very ending, nearly every of your peers has had their brains sucked out by Loboto. I'm really glad they didn't do that here. Really, there's the brain transplant of Nick, and I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, but Lily's dad. There's that there. I also really appreciate it. Like, at first I didn't even think about, Nick John Smith, but yeah, that does sound like a name, someone who doesn't really, I mean, English isn't his first language. He's from Grulovia, so sure, he's just noted, well, some people are called Nick, some people are called John Smith. I don't know, Nick John Smith, sure. And this thing of like, oh, everybody likes Nick John Smith. And then we find out, oh, yeah, by the way, he's the mole. Like, we kind of just assumed he couldn't possibly be, and he is, he has his brain removed before we even meet him. But yeah, like, it kind of helps. Yeah, that is an actual thing. Like, I've heard people who have expertise on this. If you are trying to infiltrate somewhere, being really, really nice, like, it's one of those things. Like, you gotta find the right balance, But if you get it just right, then anyone who's like, I'm a little suspicious of that person, if they tell someone who's also met that person, the second person is going to be like, what do you mean? They're so nice. They can't be doing something wrong. It's a psychological trick. And yeah, let's see. So the very next thing is, yeah, and so you go to the, Lily's dad, and he's, yeah, it was really great, this thing of like, yeah, she's like at his side, and she's like, I hope he comes too. We can't find anything wrong with him. And then, as soon as it's just the two of them, just him and Raz, he is like, oh, I'm fully awake. There's a mole, and you have to find them. If they find out that I'm not unconscious, they're going to, ruin things. So you have to figure out who the mole is. And, you actually can go around asking people questions to try to figure out who the mole is. And I absolutely did not guess that he's technically the mole. Like, fantastic. They got me thrice. They got me thrice. So let's just briefly, okay, so by the end of this game, you realize that this whole time, Maligula's mind was hidden inside Nona, who's like, once again, yeah, she seems so nice. How could she possibly be the villain? The mind of, I'm afraid I forget his name, but the prince, I think they said, or the equivalent, he is inside the head of the Psychonauts, and the, yeah, Nick John Smith used to be him, his brain is the prince. So yeah, they managed to hide 3 characters, right under our noses. But I never suspected those 3, not for a second. Fantastic job. And let's see, I think that is when, yeah, so we're told to sort mail, and then suddenly we get a package that we decide to, manually move, and turns out it's Nick Johnsmith, brainless TV. And just props to whoever. I hope that they got raise, because like the part where you accidentally dump Nick Johnsmith falls out of the package right there in front of everyone, and then one of the bullies is like, check it out, the new kid killed Nick. Wow, that is a literal killer line. That is fantastic. Just yeah. Let's see. Right. I also really appreciated that after the hazing, Raz, he was hoping to not be seen, and yeah, not only does 9 see him like that, one of the others also sees him like that, and then, yeah, 9 reveals he knows what happened, and he's trying to be supportive, and it's one of those things of like, I don't know if I want your support right now because it's making me a little uncomfortable, just, yeah. And let's see. Yeah, I think that might... Yeah, so that's when the... Yeah, so we realized we got to bring Cruller back, Fort Cruller, and it's that thing about bacon, and I love that that's what... Yeah, so you're talking to him, and you're like, I'm going to find Cruller, I just need a piece of bacon. And he just goes silent for like a second, and then goes, I'm going to ignore that last part because it makes no sense to me. And, yeah, so you go to the cafeteria, obviously, where else to get bacon in this place, and you ask, and, she's like, I don't have any more bacon. And he's like, are you sure about that? And she's like, I mean, I guess there's one piece that fell on the floor. I was going to give it to a pet. And Raz says, please give it to me. And she's like, that's disgusting. Take it. I'm closing shop for today. That's really, really funny. Because, like, at the same time, it's not like you can say what it's for. Then you're definitely not going to get it. You might get, like, sent to Hollis for evaluation or something. But, yeah. And it does, of course, work. And you go about, healing, his splintered mind. Which is so clever because, like, that was something I thought was really cool in the first one. This thing of, like, well, yeah, he isn't who he was, but that doesn't mean, in the first game, he's the one, in case you didn't play or forgot, he's essentially the auto mentalis of the first game. He's the one you go to for upgrades and items and all of this stuff, mission briefings, if I recall, all this stuff, where in this one they, it's not all, the auto is the one who gets you, stuff at the shop and such, but other characters can help brief, and yeah. But the yeah, we knew from the first one that his mind was splintered, and then in this one you get to heal him. That's great. That's such a great thing to do in a sequel, because it's such a major plot point in the first one that his mind was splintered. And yeah, this thing of, so you go to this psychological construct of the camp, and Raz is like, wow, I haven't been here in days. Because, like, yeah, that's, I mean, the mission didn't take that long. The game picks up close to the end of the first one, so it has only been days. It was also great meeting, so I think Compton Boole was maybe the name, because, yeah, I do remember his kid, a little fire starter. And let's see. And was Sam maybe his daughter? I forget right now, but yeah. Anyway, the yeah. So you have to go to these various places, and good job. I have to admit, I kind of overthought the, there's the thing about, like, oh, how, you can only get into the the barber shop, if what was it like? You need an invitation reservation, or appointment. But then I tried walking in and I was just let in. But I guess it's because the first time I tried entering, Ford wasn't there yet. But yeah, the other couple of things, bowling alley, you need a VIP card, so you got to go, to the I'm afraid. Well, yeah, is that pool? Yeah, I'm sorry, I do not remember all these names, but yeah. And other than that, what was the remaining one? There's the hairdresser. There was the bowling. I'm struggling to recall what the third one was, but yeah, you may have to do a thing or two to get there. But yeah, I will definitely say the one that they did the best job on making really creative as far as levels, and okay, let's have like something that's very different as far as gameplay element, was definitely the one where the cooking show. That was really, really well done. And I have to admit, I was very relieved when I found that I didn't actually have to. I did let's see, right now I forget, I think there were 3, right? I didn't, there was the last one I did not get in time, I have to admit. And I don't know if it'll let me try that again, or if I just don't get the reward there. But yeah, the that was such a great idea, and they captured the vibe perfectly. I try to avoid, let's see, it is technically reality television, isn't it? I swear I'm not going to go off on a rant. I'm just saying I don't know that much, but I've seen clips when leftists will do video essays when they talk about reality television, and they seem to really capture the vibe in this level. And yeah, the way that it genuinely is, just he feels like without Cassie, he can't make this work, and he's overwhelmed. And so you help, really, really nicely done. And the way that, I mean, this is very much this might be the closest we have to like a puzzle where you really can't brute force this thing. And it's not difficult, you get the directions and such, but the time limit for, if you want the reward, does help add to it. But yeah, you are running around, it's not like you can just do absolutely, yeah, there's so many different ingredients, there's so many different things you can do to these ingredients. You have to actually really focus, and they make, they get the acrobatics in there, and yeah, it's just fun. Let's see, and yeah, then by the end, each time they eat, they just eat the food in this really kind of gross, like animalistic kind of way. I don't know. I mean, if someone was starving, I wouldn't blame them for eating like that, but these are supposed to be like chefs who appreciate fine dining, and they're just gobbling it down like there's no tomorrow. And then there at the end, they vomit at you, and you have to dodge vomit and pick up the right ingredient from there. That's wonderfully just repulsive, but it's a video game. It's fun. I would not want it to happen in real life. I think the next one I did was the bowling one, and yeah, it was fun rolling on the giant ball, especially because while you're doing that, you have to do that in order to access certain areas. But while you're doing that, you cannot float like a bee, and yeah. And the way that he's standing up there and he's got the disinfectant, and you can technically also yourself roll over some of these germs. That was a fun way to do it. And yeah, I mean, I get that they are sort of doing a reverse of the kaiju level from the first, because now you are tiny and it's your opponent who's giant. Again, I just wish they did more with it. That's genuinely the only thing. I love the one with the male. That was the third one. Yeah, that really worked in my opinion. The thing about you gotta type some stuff to help send these letters, and the letters keep being returned, and just, or let's see, I think, yeah, there's at least one that's returned, and then at one point he gets a letter from her, and it's just so emotionally devastating. Really, really nicely done. We understand why he, because let's see, I believe in both of these games it is stated he shattered his mind on his own. He did this to himself because he was afraid, and in the first one we have no idea what for, and I was genuinely playing that thing like, I want to know, because like, yeah. And yeah, the hair salon, I will admit it. Let's see. What was the thing? There was definitely at least one thing I really wanted to make sure to say about that one. Right. I also felt like the letter one, they did a really good job using the different, so I already mentioned that the typing, but there's also, letters flying through the air, for example, and there's the dead letter department, and these various just really, really nicely done. Let's see. So hairdresser, yeah, I like the thing about you gotta smash up the things so you can cover them in the disinfectant or whatever it was, some kind of thing like that. And let's see. Yeah, I think that is what I have for that particular level. That covers Cruller, and that gets us to the area where so that's where we can help Cassie. Oh, right. It's now that I think about it, somewhere around here we have the you know what? I'm just going with Jack Black. I recognize his voice almost immediately, and I appreciate that we didn't have to wait forever. Like, as soon as you've completed those couple of levels, we get to the thing that we all knew was going to happen. Because if you're going to hire Jack Black, he should sing. I mean, okay, I'm sure there's at least something where he doesn't. But it just feels like, he's going to sing and or dance. That is part of the appeal of him as a performer. And they did a great job, and it was a fun song. I think it played over the end credits as well. And just this idea of you gotta get the various senses back, because like it's just not, he's incomplete without all of his senses. And he keeps having these panic attacks, and you have to fight the panic attack. Really nicely done on that as well. And we do see Malicula, at least briefly there. And yeah, very clever that the thing with Malicula, because she used water to kill, and that's why Fort Cruller made sure that Raz would stay away from water, because, if she came back, he would kill her. She would kill him with water. And so Cassie, fantastic exploration of how everyone's identity is made up of multiple different people. You have the thing about like, which Cassie are you? And the answer is, what are you talking about? Like, we're all Cassie. Or yeah. Are you the real Cassie? I think was the question. We're all Cassie. We're, different parts of her life. Sometimes she's an author. Sometimes she's, the problem is not that there are different aspects to her. It's the idea of saying that some of those aspects are inherently wrong. And that's such a wonderful progressive message. I cannot even. And that's, of course, where we get the clone Raz. At one point, I talked to him, and my Raz asked, how are things, clone Raz? And he responded, bold of you to think that you're the original. Amazing. Just top marks. That was also where, I engaged in a fight, and then after several minutes of fighting, Raz was like, oh, right, I should find books. I know, Raz, I'm like 5 seconds from opening the area that has the book. Calm down, And that was also great. I really appreciated, I think they, over the course of the game, had the right amount of just the 2D, pure platforming stuff. I thought that was quite fun, because, I already mentioned the heart race. You also have, in this area, you have the, you enter books, and then you have to jump across the words and letters. Fantastic. Just, And there was also the doctor part. That also had some of that. Yeah, I think and I love the fact that, because, first time you see Cassie, it's like, oh no, this scary woman in the woods with, and then later you find out, no, she's hiding. It's she's uncomfortable. I forget if they say if it is agoraphobia, but certainly there's some, maybe it's just similar, but certainly there's something going on there. And part of it is that she is not accepting all aspects of herself right now. And once you help her with that, it's completely resolved. And very clever, the thing about, there's this thing that you can pick up with the telekinesis that enables you to go up there. Otherwise, the bees will get you. Oh, the bees! Not the bees! They're in your eyes. And right, I loved, so after I put, so the brain inside Nick John Smith, which we later find out once that, there was a reunion between him and the other one. I think it was the cooking show brain level one. Yeah, turns out they're romantically a couple. Fantastic. The way that there's it doesn't say, I don't know, I mean, this is somehow, for some ridiculous reason, supposed to be less worthy than a straight couple. Like, no, of course not. Love is love. Like, it would be wrong if someone was underage, but like, I happen to notice that a lot of the people most vocal about how they personally don't think that there's something wrong with a grown man. It's somehow frequently man. Interesting. And it's so frequently men saying that. Weird. Just a complete coincidence, obviously. The ones saying that they think that it would be okay for a grown man to marry, and then for an underage girl, and for her not to be allowed a divorce for years, and then they're going to brag about, oh, they're still married. Yeah, because you made it illegal for them to divorce. Like, of course that's going to be the case. The vast majority of people I have become aware exist. Thankfully, I haven't personally directly encountered very many of them myself. They tend to be cishet, white, conservative men. And to be clear, I'm not saying all cishet, white, conservative men are like that. I'm merely saying I have encountered so many more of them than ones who are, for example, LGBTQ+. And but I love the bit with, oh, can I kiss you? And he's like, these are not my lips. And I think they did kiss after the reuniting at the very end of the game, but I right now I forget if we see it or if it's just implied that that's going to... Maybe it's just that I figured, well, as soon as the... Because, we know that by the end they find all the different ones to put back. I also really love that it was Lily, if I recall correctly, who found her dad's brain. As soon as she saw the memory, and it's like, oh, I'll go get it then. And she does, and puts it back. Right. I love the little bits with Oleander. Early on you talk to Hollis, and Oleander's like, I'm telling you, we need a big tank. Please, 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 please. And she's like, I am not giving you a tank. And he walks off, and he's just okay. If my hand here is his head, he just left the frame. And then Raz opens his big mouth and is like, I agree, Hollis, you definitely shouldn't give him a tank. And he pokes his head back and it's like, you little... That was fantastic. And it is like, I mean, yeah, I fought the mental tank. I don't think you should give him a real one. It was a big enough deal that way, And then there at the end, he's like, how could you possibly do... This is totally different than the time I did it, And that was also, I mean, I already said it in one... I forget if I did more than one video, but I did a thoughts video on the first one, and I said, it was so funny there at the end when he's like, it wasn't me. You saw. I was here the whole time, And yeah, they're still getting great stuff out of him. And apparently his new office is like the broom closet or something, because he's not being fired, but they're letting him know that he's in the doghouse. And or the broom house, I suppose. The crap house. And I guess that does bring us. Yeah, and so there's also, so yeah, you find the psychic lathe. Is that what they call it? I forget, but something along those lines. One of the things is you can't get to it because of bees. Already talked about Cassiopeia. Nice, good job on the name. Love all the puns, obviously. And then you also have to deal with all the vines, the plants. And so you find him, and you find out, his mother was alcoholic, and he feels like maybe he should have stopped her. And like it's such an important issue to deal with, because there's so many people who blame themselves. And listen, if you are a child or a teenager, then it is not your responsibility. And most, maybe if you know someone, if there's a resource or something, or someone that can maybe help, if you can try to make them aware of it. But it is not your responsibility to stop one of your parents or both of them from an addiction. That is not something that is any underage individual's personal responsibility. That is way too much to put on them, And yeah, by the end we understand that's why there's all those bottles, and just, yeah, fantastic, really, really well done. And yeah, that's the one with the plant, with you have to find all the seeds, and very nicely done on that, and the little butterfly, and the way that it will carry his head, and where he is, the water goes down, so you have to time your jumps right. That was fun. I wouldn't have minded maybe a little bit more. I mean, okay, by the end of that level, no, yeah, by the end of that level, they've done a really great job on that. What I'm saying is, I wish there were more levels that had stuff like that, because once again, in the first one, it's nearly every single level. Let's see. I think that does pretty much get us to, yeah. So that's when you and some of the others, yeah. Let's see. It's you and Cruller who go in, but the others power it, I think is the idea, And you end up inside Nona's head, and genuinely really clever. This thing of Ford put, her in there, and by the end we find out, I mean, she's like an instinctive, she's essentially like the lizard brain. She's the anger and the rage, and we find out there's not anything inherently wrong with, I mean, Maligula is like the malevolent version, hence mal is, malevolent, melanoma. No, wait, that's a different, whatever. The root mal tends to mean something bad. Maladjusted is also, malformed, stuff like that. Anyway, the yeah, she just wanted her country to be safe, and she fell for propaganda and was scared, and so she did this, just really, really well done. But yeah, as you're running through, you've got the stuff with the circus, and you got to work with the others. Right, I did also, let's see, there was a thing where I was supposed to talk to Raz's brother, and yeah, I did that and helped him, with the thing, because of the telekinesis, and he was like, okay, fair enough, you're, maybe it's not so bad that you're a psychic, and I did talk to Nona as the, I'm afraid I forget her name, but Frazee, maybe, she kept throwing stuff at me, because she's also psychic, and I think she was TKing it at me, and, she's like, you better talk to Nona, she could die any day, and that's such a great way to just, really underline for the player, because if I recall correctly, you have to go through that part in order to complete the game. That's how I remember it, at least. And yeah, that tells them, Nona, old and frail, and so I did, of course, talk to Nona. And yeah, at the time I had no idea, but that's a good bit of setup and payoff. I had no clue that was going to be the payoff, that there was going to be a payoff at all. Really, really well done there. But yeah, so the, yeah, once you do the circus stuff inside her mind, and then you go through all this, I forget, was it knitting or sewing, something along those lines, related stuff. And yeah, clearly some part of Nona's mind does realize, yeah, she broke out, but she didn't do evil. She just, she didn't feel threatened anymore. She just wanted a nice, comfortable, just, yeah, she was happy with the family. She's been Raz's grandmother since before he was born. And in all that time, she didn't do anything. She didn't even harm a fly. And yeah, it's, there at the end, we do fight her, but it is completely clear what's going on there. Yeah, and so it's turned off by Lily's dad, and so we go into his mind. And right now, I forget. Did we maybe? I think we ask Lily's permission because obviously, you know, um, the prince is not going to give it, and it's one of those things of like, I mean, she thinks that that's, I mean, technically it's her dad's body, so it's essentially like a family member giving consent when the patient themselves cannot. And loved all the stuff they did in there with the propaganda. So it's like, it's a small world. And you see, like, I guess maybe not everybody found, but I'll talk briefly about, so, you find I forget what they call them, but there's a little vault of memories, and in that you see that he was more upset when they ran out of caviar than at people being executed, because he was just a pampered little child. He didn't understand any of this, and that's why he's still trying so hard to do this. And the parts where he sings along, I'm sorry, listen, if you think that this was stunt casting for either Jack Black or I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Such a fan of his too. Frodo Baggins. I'm sorry, I forget his the actor's name right now. If you think it's stunt casting for one or both of them, I absolutely disagree. I thought they did fantastic, both of them. But yeah, the parts where he's singing along to the propaganda song, and it's just, yeah. And it's wonderfully annoyingly catchy too. And that is where we get the part where we have to adjust, so it's background and there's foregrounds, It was just like, I mean, I can tell you, I got it in one, and I don't think it asked me to do it more than once. That's, I don't know. I didn't think that needed to be there, honestly. Yeah, and then there's the thing about, like, okay, now you have to get, what was it? You have to get the egg into this part, and the guy saying, warmer, warmer, ice cold, like, okay, I don't know. I wouldn't have hated if that was like, just if we could turn that off, but yeah. And yeah, I appreciated the trap, I mean, they kind of gave it away by having a ton of healing right before it, but still, you're being attacked by an angry mob of Gurlovian citizens, and then, the actual, yeah, sensors and all the, and I really liked how tiny the arena was to begin with. I think I did actually lose the very first time I attempted that, so well done. I did not fail very often in fighting in this, and rarely other stuff either. Also, really wanted to say about the psychedelic level. I was very impressed by how far they pushed the psychedelic without it becoming like sensory overload, because it's really, really difficult, because you've got all these, like, the music and the, like, it looks like an acid trip from what I understand acid trips to look like. I've seen stuff drawn by people who've done acid, and yeah, just I'm really, really in awe of I would never have guessed that you could do that much and not go overboard with it. And that was also, it was fun driving the car a little bit there. That's also, I wouldn't have hated if there had been a tiny bit more, it doesn't have to be driving, but some kind of vehicle thing, maybe some flying instead of floating, just here and there a little bit. That would have been cool. I liked exploring caves. Let's see. I think that pretty much, I will say, near the end, I definitely did think, let's see, Norma, right? I thought Norma was the mole, but good misdirect. She thought I was the mole. That's why she's been, some of her behavior is explained by that. And that's why, when she sees me there, she runs to get, yeah, it makes perfect sense that would be the, yeah. Yeah, let's see. Am I remembering and understanding it right? Did she also talk to the boss man, and he told her, if someone messes with the psycholathe, let me know, because they're the, or watch the others and try to see if you can find the mole. And then it's yeah. Also, like, there's one part where two of the interns are having a conversation, and you're like clearly right next to them, and they're talking about, I think Raz is the mole, and the other one's like, he's standing right next to us. And I think the other one was like, I know. Right, and do you even lift, bro? Was funny. And that's also just like, yeah, he's completely nonplussed about that. You know, let's see, because he's got the psychic power. It doesn't actually negatively affect him. You know, you right, for those who didn't try, you can TK Morris. You know, so you lift him out of the, you know, and he doesn't like get upset. He's just like, okay, whatever. As if you talk to him about the radio station, you know, he'll say, oh, I mean, we need guests who talk about music. What can you bring to the table there? And Raz will say, well, I mean, I mostly know these circus songs. And he's like, I'll be in touch. And I think, yeah, I thought it worked, this thing of like, you know, I think it's Norma maybe, who, you know, she, if you confront her about the hazing, she'll say that if she can find your clothes, she will give them back to you if you collect everything. I have to admit, I did not find absolutely everything, but that's a good way to have the, you know, the first game also had something similar, but I think there it was organized by some of the adults. But yeah. Yeah, I will admit I did lose, I think, twice in the final fight against Malila, and I definitely did notice that I did not get to continue from... right now I actually forget if any of the boss fights allowed you to continue, or if it was just that I did better at the other ones, so it wasn't a problem. If, you know, if I did take some hits, I was able to heal or something. But yeah, that last time did take several attempts, but I did get there, and I could totally see, because the, you know, if you get to rank 102, although can you, because doesn't it require Cassie's ability, and can you even go back to some of the places that you need it? I don't know, maybe some of the places you don't actually need it. I just thought you'd... Yeah, because there's at least one spot in the headquarter building where you definitely, where there's one of those doors. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. I did really like that you get right. I already mentioned that in the. There's a, anyway. Moving on. The video is long enough without me repeating myself. Yeah, I really appreciated that. You know, both before I went into the last of Ford's mines, it said, you know, point of no return. Are you sure? And the same thing for when I entered the Psycho Lathe. Let's see. I think, yeah. Uh, the let's see. I thought they did a good job. Like, there's clearly empathy for the people of Grulovia. You know, it was the I think they call him Czar. You know, he was the problem, not the people, and it wasn't really Maligula either, or the Lucy. It wasn't her fault. She was manipulated by a power. You know, this woman was manipulated by a powerful man who didn't want to lose power, didn't like the way things were going, and she gets the blame. You know, sadly happens in history, and hopefully games like this can help have people really questioning. You know, yeah. I think, you know, when you hear, oh, this woman has done something terrible, like, so frequently, like, I'm not saying it's always an individual man, but you can usually trace it back to, you know, patriarchy, capitalism, systems that women did not create and that harm them more than it harms us men. All of us are harmed by them, but yeah. I think that pretty much does cover. I feel like there's one more thing that I really want to make sure to say. Let's see. Say, can you see? Yeah, I think they did a really good job varying the different arenas for the, you know, so the for the bosses. When you, right, and the fact that I think every single mini boss eventually becomes a mainstay of the Rogues Gallery. Really nicely done on that. But yeah, I already mentioned the one with the whirlpool. I will admit the controls there kick my ass a little bit, but you know, I got there. But the you know, yeah, that one's nice, and that one's really unique for the game. You have the Lady Luctopus, where, she'll throw a bunch of things, and sometimes you have to jump onto the things after she's thrown them because she'll electrify the floor, and you got to grab those bomb things and in the video game and throw them into the and also I love the way that you'd meet some of them in there, and they're talking about why they're there, and then Raz turns his back and you just see this like tentacle pulling. Sometimes you see them disappear, sometimes you see the tip of the tentacle or something like that. Very nicely done on that. Also just good use of, you go to different parts of a hospital. I agree with Raz. One has to really remind oneself they're just fictional. They're figments of imagination. This is not I did not actually help a rich couple who clearly shouldn't be parents become parents. And let's see. I think. Let's see. Right. I like the thing with how. Let's see. I think in the first one you have like a titanium. You can find titanium deposits around with the sort of almost like a metal detector, and then in this one the detector is for those thoughts. Nicely done on that, and the fact that one of the upgrades allows you to grab onto, was it dark thoughts or something, so if you don't get that upgrade you're not going to be able to access those areas. I also felt like they did a pretty good job of, I wasn't super concerned about which, I tried to just apply common sense to figure out what to upgrade and what to hold off on. And it was like, well, there's obviously, by the end I hadn't upgraded the one that allows you to see from other people's perspectives at all. Love that one's used for I forget what it's called, the source of the problem or something, synonym for that, something like that, that you actually have to use the ability there. So in the middle of combat, you got to dodge all of its attacks, while maybe also that first time I think you fight it by itself, but later you have to fight other enemies and you have to dodge its attacks and then be ready to jump into its mind for that, so you can other than that I upgraded pretty much everything at least once, and I tried to focus on the ones that were especially useful. So, the levitation ball, for example, was one of the first, because, there are certain things you can only access through that. And I got the dark thoughts grabby thing as soon as I could, because several places that you can only get to through that. Yeah, I think that does just about cover. Right, now I remember I completely, I meant to finish that thought. I don't know how long ago, but the thing about it, if you reach rank 102 and fully upgrade at rank 102, you can upgrade, you can get the fourth and final upgrade for the, I keep forgetting what it's called, but the thing where you see from someone else's perspective. That apparently enables you to use all psi abilities with no cooldowns. Obviously, that will come in super handy against Maligula there at the end. Yeah. Let's see. I feel like there's one more thing, but what on earth was it? Yeah, really cool upgrades for stuff like melee and Psi Blast. I forget if those are the same upgrades for the first one, but you can like ricochet Psi Blasts, and or do they split maybe? It's something along those lines, where you can hit multiple. And the one I also upgraded was the Pyro Kinesis Pyro. Yeah. Seeing the ball expand was that came in so handy. Seeing them, having them run around after that. Right. Also, the one for the for slowing things down, definitely helped to make it a bubble instead of just a 100% targeted thing. But and they also did some good stuff with that, where you have to slow things down so you can jump onto or past something. Yeah. that was very satisfying when I realized that was how to get into that. There's a secret passage with the what's it called, the what on earth is that called? It's a waterfall, you know. And yeah, you gotta slow the thing down so that you can jump in through. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I just feel like it was really, really nice of Batman to rent that place out.